This is Bravo Brazos Valley, brought to you by BVPO, the Physician Center, where the patient comes first. And I'm Tom Turbiville. This information has been sitting in my BBV file for a few weeks now, and I've just been waiting for the right time to share it. So why not now, right after the Texas A&M students are back from their holiday break? It's good news about the students that A&M brings onto their campus, and I will share it with you right after this.
Brazos Valley, there's a new way of caring at the Physician Center. The area's newest hospital features beautifully appointed private patient suites featuring a sitting room for families and friends. Plus, the Physician Center medical staff practices over 40 specialties of medicine and surgery. Personal concierge services, plus local physician ownership and management. Discover the right mix of comfort and care at the Physician Center, where the patient comes first.
Now, I'll try not to drown you in numbers, but here are some numbers that are impressive, and they were given to me last month by Dr. Haskell Monroe when he was in the studio to record the week-long series I did with him. As you know, Dr. Monroe is an expert of just about everything A&M, especially considering that he did not actually go to school here, but he did teach here between gigs as chancellor at Missouri and president of Texas El Paso. Dr. Monroe showed me a chart, one that he had shared with new A&M President Robert Gates soon after Gates took over. The chart ranks Texas A&M among other schools in the Big 12. Now understand, nothing I'm saying here has anything to do with athletics or athletes per se, and while there is no official academic competition between the Big 12 schools, maybe after you hear this you'll think there should be. 55% of all Texas A&M undergrads were in the top 10% of their high school graduating class, and that is tops among schools that are in the Big 12. Better than Texas's 50%, Baylor's 30%, Oklahoma's 32%. Sorry, Nebraska, Kansas State, Colorado, and Texas Tech. They're ranked 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th on that list, all under 25% of undergrads in the top 10% of their high school classes. Now, the number of entering freshmen who come back for their sophomore year, well, Texas leads that in the Big 12, 90%. But A&M and Colorado are close behind at 88%. Only 76% of Kansas State freshmen return the next year. And the percentage of entering freshmen who graduate in 5 years, well, A&M is tops in the Big 12 big time with 74%, beating Baylor's 71%, UT's 70%. Again, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas State, and Texas Tech are the bottom four in the Big 12 in that, all under 54% graduating in 5 years. Now, let me remind you again, this has nothing to do with student athletes. We're talking about all of Texas A&M and all of these schools, of which student athletes, of course, are a part. But that's comparing A&M to the Big 12 schools. If A&M were in the Big 10, say, they'd rank second behind Michigan in freshmen in the top 10% of their high school class. Tied for 5th behind Michigan, Penn State, Illinois, and Wisconsin in retention of freshmen. All four of those, over 90%, come back for their sophomore year. And they would be 4th behind Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin in 5-year graduation. Now, how about other high-profile academic institutions that we know around here, like Rice or SMU, both private schools? Well, A&M compares pretty well. Rice, as you would imagine, has very impressive numbers in this regard. 85% of their freshman class are in the top 10% of their high school graduating class. 96% return for their sophomore year, and 89% graduate in 5 years. But only 32% of SMU's freshmen are in the top 10%. 85% come back, and 73% graduate in 5. Just some numbers that Dr. Haskell Monroe shared with me, and I thought they were worth passing along. For A&M, they are good numbers that will only get better, we hope. I'm Tom Turbiville for BVPO, the Physician Center. This is Bravo Brazos Valley. This is Bravo Brazos Valley, brought to you by BVPO, the Physician Center, where the patient comes first, and I'm Tom Turbiville. If you don't know Haskell Monroe, you're probably in the minority in this town. It's high time you knew about this fascinating historian of Texas A&M. He never took a class here, but he's taught a bundle of them before and after gigs in the Navy, as president of the University of Texas at El Paso, as chancellor at the University of Missouri. That was all after his youth that started with his birth in Garland, which back then, he says, was a 20-mile drive from Dallas.
No one in the family tree had ever finished high school, let alone go to college. But I have no memory that does not include my parents saying to me very firmly, when you go to college.
We'll have more right after this.
Professional, efficiently delivered, high-quality healthcare services. That's what the Physician Center provides. Residents of the greater Brazos Valley area, that's who the Physician Center serves. Preference, the sanctity of the patient-physician relationship, the dignity of patients, guests, and staff. That's why the Physician Center is open at 3131 University Drive East in Bryan. The Physician Center, a new way of caring, where the patient comes first.
Haskell Monroe's dad was a construction carpenter in military camps around Texas and Arkansas. His family moved to Orange, where Haskell went to high school. Then he was off to Austin College for undergraduate and his master's degree. Then to Rice for his Ph.D., and that led him to A&M.
We are looking for a job in the summer of 1959, and I got a call that spring that A&M needed somebody to come and teach, to fill in for a man who was going to be gone for a year. And the pay was $4,950 for 9 months, and that was a pretty good job. In January of that year, the department head, Joseph Milton Nance, Notes Nance was the nickname the kids gave him, he called me into his office on a special January day, and he said that the man I was replacing was not coming back, and then he added the sentence, "So you can stay."
Besides getting a full-time job, Haskell Monroe didn't know it at the time, but he was about to become a vital part of A&M's history.
I was appointed as the secretary of the Aspirations Committee. We were to spend 18 months studying what we thought A&M should aspire to be in 1976, the centennial.
And that committee, in 1961, made some fairly significant and controversial recommendations.
Coeducation, non-compulsory core, racial integration, broadening the curriculum, include more disciplines, more graduate programs, changing the name.
Yeah, the Aspirations Committee advised the name be changed to Texas State University.
We looked at what every other state we knew of had done, and every state we knew of, the separate land-grant school in Kansas and Oklahoma and Mississippi and had been Oklahoma A&M College, Kansas A&M, Mississippi, and they changed it to Oklahoma State, and we recommended Texas State University.
But the administration did not go for that. Otherwise, we'd be whooping for good old TSU right now. The final report of the committee was written by Monroe, who gave it to then Vice President Wayne C. Hall, who gave it to University President Earl Rudder, who had some thoughts about the radical changes.
I go back to the office and start reading it, and I find some very mysterious, difficult words to comprehend. No way, ain't going to happen, can't do this, how'd y'all come up with this?
Turns out, according to Haskell Monroe, Rudder became a true believer of the changes, with some urging of a future U.S. president with the initials LBJ, who had some pretty strong UT ties. You're going to learn more about that and a lot of Aggie history that you probably didn't know, like the rest of the 12th Man story. It's Haskell Monroe Week on BBV. I'm Tom Turbiville for BVPO and the Physician Center. This is Bravo Brazos Valley. This is Bravo Brazos Valley, brought to you by Meese & Associates, and I'm Tom Turbiville. I continue to be fascinated by the fascinating people that we have in our towns. Possibly there's none more fascinating than Haskell Monroe, who in 90 minutes the other day taught me a semester's worth of history, mainly about Texas A&M. I could spend a week of Bravo Brazos Valleys on this gentleman, and next week I will do exactly that. But here's his resume in Cliff Notes form: Dean of Faculties Emeritus at Texas A&M, Chancellor Emeritus at the University of Missouri, former President of UT El Paso, undergraduate degree from Austin College, Ph.D. from Rice, an Aggie by choice and a brick collector by choice. Yeah, you heard me, brick collector.
I have bricks that have been picked up by somebody's right hand, left hand. I have a brick that a snake crawled across when it was still clay. And so I got started collecting bricks from historic places. I've got probably 500 or so.
And he's a Civil War authority. You'll get just a sampling of Haskell Monroe right after this. Haskell Monroe's resume of knowledge would fill volumes, and we'll get to that all next week on Bravo Brazos Valley. But I got to let him tell you about his brick collection.
I'm in the Navy in Charleston, South Carolina in the 1950s. And on the weekends, I would go out to try to find old houses, colonial mansions, forts, churches. Quite often, instead of finding a building, I found a pile of rubble. as I looked at these, I found that the bricks differed from place to place, and I learned later that before we have railroads, you didn't haul bricks very far in wagons. You had the brick maker come to your land and make the bricks. The quality of the bricks depended on the quality of the clay, the heat that the brick maker made in his fire when he was trying to, quote, burn the bricks. One of the goofiest I've ever found. In Kansas, about 100 years ago, the director of state public health for Kansas became concerned about the spread of tuberculosis. He got a law to try to discourage public expectoration, and they passed a law in Kansas that every 10th brick in sidewalks had to have this message in it: don't spit on the sidewalk. Those are real collector's items these days.
Oh, and the Civil War? Well, he sometimes had to pull out a special dialect to learn that history.
I did my doctoral dissertation on Presbyterians in the South during the war, and I found in doing research in the South in the summers during the 1950s and 60s, if you simply smiled and said the war, then they didn't look at you as if you were some troublemaker from way up north. I did have a fellow one day in Macon, Georgia, though, as I was getting gas at the Texaco station. He looked at me and he said, "Boy, you not from around here. You been 2 or 3 days doing something. What you up to?" "Well, sir, I've been doing research on how we tried to defend the South when the Yankees came down here to take our rights away from us and to invade our land." "Oh, good, good. Can I help you anyway?"
Next week, starting Monday, Haskell Monroe, Beyond the Brick Collector. You will enjoy it. I'm Tom Turbiville for Meese & Associates. This is Bravo Brazos Valley. This is Bravo Brazos Valley, brought to you by BVPO, the Physician Center, where the patient comes first. And I'm Tom Turbiville. For a full generation now, 31 years to be exact, females have officially been a part of the Texas A&M landscape, and yesterday we introduced you to Dr. Haskell Monroe. Among the many entries in his resume is author of the original committee report back in 1961 that first suggested co-eds at A&M College. It eventually happened in 1971 with the backing of then popular school president and World War II hero General Earl Rudder. But Monroe teaches us that Rudder got the encouragement he needed to push the notions of integration and females from a very well-known Texan.
I now know that apparently the key event in all of these changes came about in Washington, D.C., when a tall Texan who was going to become president of the United States before long put his arm around the former mayor of Brady, Texas, who had led that tall Texan's Senate campaign in the Hill Country counties in 1948. Apparently, late one evening, Lyndon Johnson put his arm around Earl Rudder and gave him words of encouragement.
Now, Dr. Monroe was not there for those conversations, but he says that if he were writing the novel about the event...
Apparently, he said, "Come on, Earl, A&M is going to be left behind. It's not growing now. You don't have a choice on integration. The courts have decided that. Go ahead and do it before you have a lawsuit. Who knows how long it might be before there'll be a lawsuit about women. I'll back you." Congressman Olin Teague, great man, was your classmate. Tiger Teague will do whatever you ask him to do. He'll back you. Jake Pickle, the longtime veteran congressman from Austin, you and Jake have known each other since you were 8th graders. I bet he'll back you. Sterling Evans, the chairman of your board, he and I have done a lot of land deals together. He's been for coeducation since the day he arrived as a 17-year-old country boy, and he found there weren't any girls here. In my interview with Mr. Evans, I said, "When did you first become a supporter of coeducation?" And he loudly said, "Since the day I got there as a country boy and there weren't any girls there, I've always wanted girls at A&M."
We'll have more right after this. You know, some people agree that had A&M not made the changes that they needed to make 3 decades ago, that Texas Tech, not Texas A&M, would share the spotlight now with the University of Texas. But the changes took some politicking and sometimes some sleight of hand. Monroe talks about how the former students approved of the new policies back then.
They also rigged a meeting of the former student board on the morning before the A&M board is going to vote on these changes. I say rigged it. They changed the agenda for the former student board meeting at the last moment. They added a new topic at the end of the agenda titled Other Business. And as everybody is getting ready to leave, I understand that Chairman Lindsay said, just a minute, we've got one more item. Here's the backup. We're passing it out. Is there any discussion? Oh, there's a motion. I hear a second. All in favor say aye. There are no nays. And then they go down the hallway and tell the A&M board that the former student board has endorsed all these changes.
This crash course in A&M history will continue tomorrow with A&M Dean of Faculties Emeritus, Dr. Haskell Monroe. I'm Tom Turbiville. For BVPO and the Physician Center, this is Bravo Brazos Valley. This is Bravo Brazos Valley, brought to you by BVPO, the Physician Center, where the patient comes first, and I'm Tom Turbiville. Are you ready for more A&M history as told to me by one of Aggieland's foremost historians? Haskell Monroe needs no notes to recall these stories. It's part of his everyday passion for the school he loves so dear. Yesterday, we talked about the most historical changes of A&M's history in 1971 when women became a permanent part of the spirit of Aggieland. Earl Rudder approved of those changes, but he died in March of 1970. But his successor, Jack Williams, had just as much determination, if not more so, to see them all come about. Professor Monroe, if you please.
And one of Dr. Williams' conditions, he said he would not come unless the board would give him authority to take an existing dormitory and designate it for women. So when the spring term of 71 begins, we have a girls' dorm, and the enrollment explodes.
So the bar had to be raised as far as requirements to get into Texas A&M. You see, before that, the requirements were quite simple.
You had to have a high school diploma. There was nothing about grades, courses, class rank, or anything like that. No felony convictions, and no communicable diseases.
Haskell Monroe calls the 20 years from 1959 to 1979 that linked the administrations of Earl Rudder and Jack Williams the years of A&M's Camelot. Indeed, Williams was perfect for A&M at the precise time he came here, and Monroe recalls an interview with Ford Albritton, a former regent, about how Williams came to be the president of the school. Now here's Monroe, picking him up as he's quoting Albritton.
I'd been pestering Earl to get a national PR firm to start polishing A&M's image nationwide. And so we're on the plane. I've got my old buddy John Lindsay with me, and we are flying President Rudder up to Chicago to meet with this firm. With no malice aforethought, I said, Earl, God help us if it were to happen, but if something were to happen to you, do you have somebody at your right hand that is well prepared to step in and take over? Said Mr. Rudder suddenly said, no, I don't, and it's my fault. I learned on the battlefield in Western Europe during World War II that the CO may go down in action any moment, and you need to have somebody ready. So Mr. Albritton said, I dropped the topic, but then that night at supper, Mr. Rudder said, I've been thinking about it since you asked me this afternoon. If something were to happen to me, you go to the University of Tennessee system and get their new chief academic officer, a man named Jack Kenny Williams, who just went up there after being Commissioner of Higher Education for Texas. Before coming to Texas, he had gone to work as a beginning faculty member in Southern history at a separate land-grant college in a southern state that was located off the main highway in a small town about 100 miles from the state capital, where the state university was located. That separate land-grant school was all male, racially segregated, had a limited curriculum, not much graduate work, had a corps of cadets, and in that state, the South Carolina Gamecocks tell country boy stories about the Clemson Tigers, and Clemson made the changes that A&M made 3 or 4 years before A&M made them, so Jack Williams' experience at Clemson would help him to understand A&M quite well.
So how many of you knew about A&M's link to Clemson in a roundabout way? More education from Haskell Monroe coming up tomorrow. I'm Tom Turbiville. For BVPO and the Physician Center, this is Bravo Brazos Valley. This is Bravo Brazos Valley, brought to you by BVPO, the Physician Center, where the patient comes first, and I'm Tom Turbiville. Some history of Texas A&M that you might not know about. I certainly didn't until my visit with Dean of Faculties Emeritus Haskell Monroe recently. The man who, besides serving A&M, was president of Texas El Paso and chancellor at Missouri before returning here in 1997. His recall of A&M history is uncanny, really. We've been talking about the historic changes brought about by Presidents Earl Rudder and Jack Williams between 1959 and 1979. Adding female students to the Aggie community evidently was the highest profile change. But not only did that bring a lot of women to campus, but it evidently brought a lot of men.
We tried to offer estimates of what the enrollment would be in 1976, 15 years after our study, if there were no changes. We thought the enrollment would go from 7,000 to maybe 8,100. But if we made all the changes, coeducation, optional core, higher admission requirements, racial integration, broaden the curriculum, and so forth, we thought it would go from 17 to about 20,000. It went to 24.
So Haskell Monroe says that the team of Earl Rudder, followed by Jack Williams, was essential to A&M's history.
Rudder made the foundation, built the foundation, then Williams built the academic on that foundation.
We'll have more right after this.
Professional, efficiently delivered, high-quality healthcare services. That's what the Physician Center provides. Residents of the greater Brazos Valley area, that's who the Physician Center serves. Preference, the sanctity of the patient-physician relationship, the dignity of patients, guests, and staff. That's why the Physician Center is open at 3131 University Drive East in Bryan. The Physician Center, a new way of caring, where the patient comes first.
The A&M Medical School, to some, is still somewhat of a secret, but its roots are deep, and Jack Williams, the A&M president, along with the help of Congressman Olin Teague, brought it about in an almost accidental way. Here again is Haskell Monroe.
Under him, we start getting the doctoral programs, got the medical school. We happened to find fine print in a law passed by the state legislature in 1943, where the state of Texas officially authorized the creation of a state-funded medical school, quote, in conjunction with the Scott and White Clinic, if it's affiliated with a public institution. So we didn't have to ask for authority to have one, but we didn't have any money. The other medical schools in the state were saying, oh, we don't need another medical school, so it wasn't easy to get the money first. Mr. Teague got some VA funding. If we affiliated with the VA, well, there's a VA hospital across the street from Scott and White Clinic. So the Texas A&M Medical School is by far one of the least costly to the taxpayers of any medical school in the United States, and our medical graduates in their national board scores have led the medical schools in Texas every year except two since it came into being.
So indeed, Haskell Monroe says that for every good thing that we enjoy about Texas A&M today, it's Rudder and Williams are the ones to thank.
I give those two men credit for creating what is the real framework of what is here now.
Tomorrow, some of what you might not know about the 12th man tradition at Texas A&M. We'll talk about that and more with Dr. Haskell Monroe. I'm Tom Turbiville for BVPO and the Physician Center. This is Bravo Brazos Valley. This is Bravo Brazos Valley, brought to you by BVPO, the Physician Center, where the patient comes first, and I'm Tom Turbiville. We'll finish up our history lesson talking about more of the story of the 12th man with Haskell Monroe right after this.
Brazos Valley, there's a new way of caring at the Physician Center. The area's newest hospital features beautifully appointed private patient suites featuring a sitting room for families and friends. Plus, the Physician Center medical staff practices over 40 specialties of medicine and surgery. Personal concierge services, plus local physician ownership and management. Discover the right mix of comfort and care at the Physician Center, where the patient comes first.
You know the basics of the story of the 12th man, E. King Gill, DX Bible, the whole thing. But there is the rest of the story. Here's Dr. Haskell Monroe.
My source is Rusty Anderson, retired ophthalmologist, whose father grew up in central Tennessee and went to a little prep school where the football coach was a very promising young coach named Dana X. Bible. The year that young Anderson graduated, Coach Bible gets hired at Mississippi College, a small Baptist school in Clinton, Mississippi. he takes along young Anderson to be on the football team down there, and they open their season playing Mississippi A&M, now Mississippi State. They would get cremated because they were a little bitty school, and they couldn't take many players with them. They had to go on the train. One year, though, I believe it was the senior year, they're ahead at the half, 13-0. But in the second half, a bunch of their guys got hurt, and they have to play a little while with only 10 players on the field and 2 or 3 plays with only 9. During that time, Mississippi State scores twice, kicks both extra points, and wins the game 14-13. Coach Bible gets hired at the Agricultural Mechanical College of Texas and brings with him a new graduate of Mississippi College, Andy Anderson, who would be called Colonel Andy here later. A couple of years later, they are playing a postseason game up in Dallas. According to Rusty Anderson, the son of Andy, Coach Bible came over to him before the game started and said, you remember what happened to us when we were over there at Mississippi College and we ran out of players? Yeah, well, we don't have many players here in this game. And Heine Weir, the great fullback, he hurt his knee during the Texas game. He thinks it's all okay, but he might not be able to do the whole game. I see King Gill up there in the stands because he lives here in Dallas. Andy, you go up there and tell King to come down here and put on his uniform so that if we need him, he could substitute for Heine Weir. I had not heard that explanation of the 12th man story.
So there you go. Hope you've enjoyed this week of A&M history that you probably did not know about. From a gentleman who calls himself an Aggie by choice, Dr. Haskell Monroe.
Doing muster in Fort Worth a long time ago, and a fellow stood up in the middle of it, somewhat older than I, and he said, "What kind of Aggie are you? You didn't go there." I said, "Well, sir, I'm an Aggie by choice." He said, "What the heck does that mean?" I smiled and said, "I understand some people didn't have a choice as to where they went to school." He jumped back up and he said, "You're doggone right. In the fall of 28, my dad called me into the front room of our farmhouse up near Jacksboro, and he said, 'Son, you can stay here and pick cotton this fall, or you can go to A&M and maybe they'll straighten you out.'"
I'm Tom Turbiville for BVPO and the Physician Center. This is Bravo Brazos Valley.